Right, so I've been thinking about making this video for a long time. Ever since episode 6 actually, because there's a fair bit to unpack with this show. Murder Drones as a product has had a big impact on the lives of many people, but more than that, it's had an impact on the animation community in general. But we'll get to that later. First, let's go back to where everything started. The first teaser for Murder Drones was released on July 25th, 2021, appropriately titled Murder Drones Official Trailer. This is pretty much 100% footage from the pilot of the show, just remixed and cut so the audio doesn't line up with the visuals. The pilot followed suit, and while for its time this was a good piece of animation, especially in the YouTube space where 3D animation was very scarce as a medium, however, compared to the rest of the show we can see some very serious problems here. A big one being the legs. Glitch was smart enough to hide most of the footfalls in snow or impact craters, but on the occasions where that isn't possible, the flaws become very obvious. The pilot was also the only episode to be animated mostly with motion capture software, and while it does make for a faster and cheaper production, it's also very limited on what it can do. The characters are much less expressive with their body language, and there's much less variety in the shot selection compared to the rest of the show. What the pilot does do well, however, is the setup. A lot of the time, pilots for shows will be almost entirely separate from the rest of the production, as they need to be able to stand on their own in order to have a better shot at being greenlit. The Murder Drones pilot, however, is able to sneak in some of the important story elements for the rest of the show without compromising anything else. Stuff like Uzi's eye, which I only noticed on a rewatch after episode 3, and the sensitivity to sunlight, which becomes the thing that kills the big bad, are woven seamlessly into this narrative. That's a credit to Liam's writing style. He's very well adapted to hiding important information in plain sight and only making you aware of what it is later, which brings a lot of rewatchability into this show. While the pilot isn't a visual masterpiece on the level of the rest of the show, it is a great start, and it's garnered enough attention to get a green light for the whole series. The problem for me writing this script is that I didn't find this show until episode 2, so I can't really talk about the fandom and the reception to the pilot at the time. Thankfully, I was just a part of the largest collab in Murder Drones history, which included the first guy to ever do it, Inferno YT, and the next things I have to say are adapted from his statement. The pilot era fandom was obviously a much smaller place, made up of existing fans mostly tracked over from Meta Runner, Glitch's original big series, and fans of Indonesian Cube and Liam Vickers' other works like Scary Storytime with Liam. A smaller fandom obviously means a less toxic one, however it appears that the past has a tendency to repeat itself, and the initial announcement of Murder Drones was met with fans angry that it wasn't Meta Runner Season 3. Now doesn't that sound familiar, guys? But we'll get into the digital circus drama later. For now, on to episode 2. Heartbeat released almost exactly 1 year after the pilot to once again good acclaim by the fandom, that was growing much larger at this point. The pilot had amassed over 7 million views at this time, and Heartbeat picked up 2 million in just a few days. The nuances of our core 2 characters were more fully revealed to the audience, and a solid cliffhanger at the end of the episode left fans wondering about the future of their relationship. This episode also marks the first of 3 major shifts in animation during the show's life. With the flaws of motion capture software now more noticeable by a wider audience, the decision was made to return to a standard 3D animation technique, which took more time but ended up delivering a better product. The movements of the characters are sharper and much more expressive, and a lot more was able to be done with them, which resulted in one of the nicest shots of the show's first half. Heartbeat also delved a lot more into the body horror aspect of the show. Being robots, Murder Drones was able to skirt around YouTube's demonetization policies and give us some really gruesome stuff that the camera lingered on for a while. This isn't the clean cuts and oil splatters from off-screen present in the pilot. It's some pretty heavy stuff, especially for YouTube animation. It's at this time where yours truly found the show and some of its early creators. Inferno's updates, Vanity's reviews, and most importantly for me, Tyromaniac talks. The beginning of the MDTuber scene had begun as the depth of content that could be drawn from the show was beginning to be realized. The first theory videos also began showing up at this time. Questions regarding Nori, the origin of the Murder Drones, and whatever this absolute solver thing was, got some superficial and mostly incorrect answers. But the true story of the show was only just beginning. Now, it's time to talk about the prompting. What many still consider to be the peak episode of the show, for a number of reasons. We get the reunification of En and Uzi, complete with this ridiculous uwu face that they just had to put in there. The Knife Dance OST is what made people fall in love with AJ Despirito, leading to a powerful defense of his IP when it was falsely claimed, and Dol created yet more mysteries about the solver and what it does to drones. Overall, the episode was really well rounded and gained a lot of attention for it. There was even a brief period of time where it looked like the views on the promenade were going to outpace the pilot. By this point, most of what I'm going to call the old fandom was present and actively following the show. The story was developing nicely and everyone was really invested. Glitch also announced another big change in the animation as they headed into episode 4, as they hired the fantastic Kevin Temmer as head of animation. His casting also led to my discovery of this internet gem. Unfortunately, this is where we go from the golden youth of the show to what I'm referring as the dark episodes. A fall from grace that was foreshadowed by one simple disagreement blown out of proportion. Newsy versus Envy. For the two people who've made it this far into the video and somehow still don't know what I'm talking about, Newsy and Envy are the primary ships in Murder Drones, being between N and Uzi or N and V respectively. The pilot appeared to show a strong favoritism towards Envy, as N straight up says that he has a crush on our pantless anti-hero over here. The confession has appeared to be subtly retconned over the next two episodes, as V was relegated to much more of a side role with little interaction with N, while Uzi began showing obvious signs of a crush towards him. I also decided to weigh in on this argument somewhat at the time, with my short Uzi x N is canon now, that somehow managed to amass over 200,000 views. I think terrible writing advice summed up shipping disagreements like this the best. If there's no canon pairing, the fans will fight over different pairings in order to not only promote their own ships, but sink the other ships in the process. And this is where we get into the uncomfortable topic of pro-shipping. Once again, for those who live under a rock, pro-shipping is the act of shipping a character that's known to be a minor with another character who is known to be an adult. This is where all the anime neckbeard, actually, she's 1,000 years old memes come from. Pro-shipping is considered to be very messed up for very obvious reasons, and thus pro-shippers are often ostracized from the community, allowing alternative ships to become the fandom canon. Essentially, the argument from Envy shippers was that the Newsy ship was a pro-ship due to the appearance of N as an adult and Uzi as a teenager. The evidence for Uzi being underage comes from this shot of a missing poster board of her classmates showing ages from 17 to 19. Given that Uzi is very much on the small side of her class, it's assumed that her age is 17 as well. There was no information regarding N's height that was available at the time, and his design really didn't give anything away, aside from the height advantage he had over both Uzi and the rest of the worker population. Envy shippers made the theory that he was an adult based on certain, features that V and J, who were known to be roughly the same age as N, had. A fight then broke out among the fandom that was so egregious that Glitch themselves had to come out and clarify. Not in a statement, but in a rather obvious line in episode 4.
She's a kid, like us, V!
This line made a fair few people angry, even more relieved, and a few mildly disgusted. A rift had begun to tear in the fandom, and controversial topics such as this were becoming more commonplace. Artists who drew specific ships were harassed and bullied off their platforms by salty shippers, and it was all around a bad time to be anywhere in the fandom besides YouTube and potentially the wiki. Episode 4 itself didn't help, being one of the most poorly written in the series. There was nothing in it that was completely terrible, but it tried to push a little bit too much lore into too little time. Great for my theory video, not great if you're just trying to watch it. But here there was one personal highlight for me, which may have had a little bit of a butterfly effect on the rest of the MD-tuber scene. While watching Tyro's theory video on episode 4, I noticed a particular thumbnail pop up for only a second, and my name credited in the bottom corner. This was big news for me as I was still very small at the time, and I immediately left a comment gushing all over the video, before messaging Scatterbrain and screaming like a teenage girl who just spotted Henry Cavill. Tyro actually took notice, and it was the beginning of many a collab between the two of us. I just thought I'd inject a little bit of happiness into this point, because it's about to get so much worse. Episode 5 was the most anticipated show up until this point in the series, and it had been for some time due to Michael Kovach's comment that the episode was his personal favourite to voice act. Unfortunately for Michael, he doesn't get to see the final product before we do, so he didn't have enough time to retract his statement. Episode 5 is the worst episode in Murder Drones. Some people will try to debate and say it's Heartbeat or Cabin Fever, but they're wrong. Home is meant to act as the origin story for the Murder Drones, and in that aspect it fails spectacularly due to the addition of nobody's favourite character, Crozy. Crozy defeats the purpose of the episode by altering what actually happened, so instead of an insightful look into Envy and J's origins like we were promised, we get a semi-true rendition littered with inaccuracies. Casual viewers don't like it because it detracts from the story, theory crafters dislike it because it muddles already very dirty water, and critics hate it because the writing to compensate for the premise is contrived and the jokes don't land. The disappointment in this episode was out there for all to see, or not to see as it turns out, as Home managed only half the view count of the prominent, leading many to believe that the show and the fans were dying out. The fandom's lowest point came after this release. View counts on videos were down, less people were present and engaged with the story, theory crafting was still going strong, but that can't keep any fandom aside from Gravity Falls alive, and worst of all, artists and creators were still being harassed, but this time by a new group. The YouTube Troll Police, or UTTP as they're more commonly known, was a group of trolls and hackers set out on the internet to make people's lives marginally less enjoyable. In reality, it was a group of neckbeard narcissists too scared of the real world to leave their computers acting all tough, and a bunch of dumb 12-year-olds who thought they were funny. Most of this group's activities consisted of spamming YouTube comment sections, filling Discord chats with pictures of gore and sometimes some malware, and one actual hacker who temporarily disabled some YouTubers' access to their accounts. This is obviously not a good thing to happen to a fandom, and servers, including ones I was in or a part of, were affected, if only slightly. Some individuals, however, were hit quite hard, including the likes of your local YouTuber, who had false grooming allegations levied against him. The situation is now quite dire. Glitch pretty much only has one episode to fix the fandom, or the show is going to die, and they know this. So, Episode 6, Dead End, releases on the 18th of August 2023. While not a universal success, the episode is solid enough to renew the hope of many in the old fandom who were hanging on the edge of leaving the series behind. It also gave us some actual answers to the questions in the show and tied back to an old plot thread left dangling by Heartbeat. The introduction of adult Tessa was also a huge hit for the fans. Her personality filled whatever scene she was in, and the fresh face created immediate inspiration for many more in the artistic field. Of course, the heavy hitter in this episode was V's supposed death at the hands of the Sentinels. It was the first major character death in the show since Jay, who had only merely been seen in the pilot and was shown as the villain. The argument for the coming months mainly focused on whether she would be revived in the same way as Jay, or if Jay had saved her. Honestly, anything that prevented her from staying dead was tossed around, including yet more incorrect theories from me. While we had the benefit of hindsight here, it was genuinely unknowable how this would turn out. Liam is not at all opposed to killing off his cast. Hell, it makes up most of his stories. But with V being so recognizable and loved, as well as the potential influence of Glitch, nobody really knew what would happen. Okay, Glitch, decent enough job. You've managed to salvage the respect of most of the fandom, and left a lot of people looking for episode 7 thanks to a good cliffhanger, or elevator hanger I suppose. Let's see what Murder Drone stuff you have for us next. Okay, it's time to talk about Digital Circus. Maybe it was due to the crippling state the Murder Drones fandom had been in before this, or maybe Glitch was just now thinking that it was a good time, but the announcement of the first episode of the amazing Digital Circus was met with mild amusement at best. Views on the early shorts showing off the characters never cracked 1 million views, and almost nobody was talking about the project. Aside from me, of course, I'm still claiming that one. Nobody in the old fandom expected Digital Circus to blow up, but blow up it did. The most successful indie animation pilot of all time, merch sales multiple times out of Murder Drones, a real store in Japan, and later a cafe inspired by the cast, Digital Circus got the attention of Mr. Beast, Netflix agreed to this quite frankly absurd business deal just to get the rights to stream the show non-exclusively. Digital Circus stole the spotlight from everything else and became the thing in indie animation. And oh boy, were people pissed. Murder Drones fans thought Digital Circus fans were a bunch of Gen Alpha iPad kids who were encroaching on their space and ruining the fandom, while Digital Circus fans were tired of seeing Murder Drones content from Glitch because it wasn't what they wanted to see. Remember what I said about history, guys? For the most part though, since Digital Circus and Murder Drones are so different, there's been very little in the way of interaction between the two groups. Even I don't know a whole lot about the Digital Circus fandom, and I'm chronically online. Regardless, its release and overwhelming success caused the delay of episodes 7 and 8 into 2024, a delay that was further increased when one of the old SMG4 voice actors started complaining that she was fired without notice, despite there being absolutely no obligation for Glitch to tell her because she wasn't on staff, she was just hired as a contractor to voice specific lines. The drama surrounding that situation and the allegations that followed it was so stupidly overblown that it does not need any more coverage, but it is the reason for the delay. Thankfully, we were not forced to go with nothing this time, due to the inaugural Glitch X that released in November. The 4-hour livestream featured Liam Vickers and Murder Drones pretty heavily, so fans were satisfied enough to stick around for the 7-month wait. Of course, the main appeal for Glitch X was the focus on the indie animation community, which is something that Murder Drones has had a profound impact on. Glitch and Spindlehorse are still pretty much the only big YouTube animators right now, and with the decision to sell Has Been Hotel off to Amazon Prime, Murder Drones remained the largest standalone series on this platform for a while, allowing it to be the source of inspiration for a ton of other creatives who are now actually able to see that their dreams are possible. Just look at the variety in the 2024 Glitch X. That would not be there without Murder Drones. But tangents aside, back to the show. The conclusion of that wait was an episode that returned to the magnificence of the promenade. Emotional, well thought out, an excellent set of converging storylines, and a reveal of Tessa as being Sin all along that I have my own opinions on, but many people saw as a good thing. Unfortunately, despite the episode's success, both with the old and new fandom, as well as in the views and monetary departments, it was becoming more and more clear to all of us that the next episode of the show would be its last. Marketing material, which initially read Season 1, was switched to Series, and the title given to Episode 8, Absolute End, made the fact that we had done here pretty obvious. Of course, the devoted and the dim attempted to look past this fact and hold out hope for more Murder Drones, but when Gooseworks came out and said that her and Liam were fine with only one season, the fate of the show was sealed. The release of episode 8 of Murder Drones was the most highly anticipated drop in Glitch history, and unfortunately, it didn't please everyone. For a take on the positives, you can see all of my videos on the episode. For a take of the negatives, you can watch Vanity's review. However you look at the episode from a writing perspective, there are a few things that are generally agreed on, the most prominent of which is the animation itself. This episode marks the final transition in style as Glitch switched to the Unreal 5 engine, which allowed for much cleaner graphics and smoother animation. As a result, Absolute End is by far the best looking product Glitch has released, and the team behind it did everything they could to give us a send-off to remember. So where does that leave us at the end of it? Well, Many casual fans and members of the old fandom are likely to leave it behind. There's no more official content, so there's little point in them staying. However, for those like myself, and you, since you made it this far, there is more to be done yet. Let's Celebrate Murder Drones, Yagster's magnum opus of a collab, features many of the creators that plan to be a part of that. People who saw that they weren't making more episodes and said, fuck it, I'll do it myself. Vanille, Xander, Orcs, B, Salty, Animator Thing, and so many more are in the process of creating fan comics, animations, and all manner of other things centered around this show. And I believe that the fandom will enter a fantastic twilight age. The UTCP is dead, those who invade chat rooms and comment sections only to hate will get bored and fight on the groups to annoy, but us, we will be here, with the show that changed our lives, and it will live on through us. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching, and have a good one.